There were once 17,000 named varieties of apples growing across the United States. Today, just 15 varieties account for 90% of every apple sold in American grocery stores. 11,000 heirloom varieties have vanished forever. This is the story of how America ripped out its fruit trees, and why some people are desperately trying to bring them back. To understand what we lost, you first need to understand what we had. In colonial America, fruit trees weren't decorative, they were essential infrastructure. When the Ohio Company sold land to frontier settlers, it required them to plant no fewer than 50 apple trees and 20 peach trees within 3 years just to keep their land titles. By 1749, the Swedish naturalist Per Kalm traveled through Staten Island and noted that nearly every single home had a small orchard attached to it. This wasn't unusual, this was just how Americans lived. And the centerpiece of that life was cider. Not the sweet pasteurized stuff you buy in a jug at the supermarket, but hard cider, the real thing. In 1767, the average New England family was consuming about 35 gallons of hard cider per person per year. Per person. Between 1800 and 1830, the average American drank 23 gallons of alcohol annually, and 15 of those gallons were cider. As Michael Pollan put it, an apple grown in America was far more likely to wind up in a barrel of cider than to be eaten. In rural areas, cider replaced not only wine and beer, but coffee and tea, juice, and even water. So when you picture early America covered in apple orchards, don't picture quaint farms with pies cooling on windowsills. Picture an entire national economy and daily life built around fermented fruit. By 1905, more than 14,000 unique apple varieties grew across the country, each one adapted to local soils, local climates, local tastes. The diversity was staggering. And then it started to disappear. The first blow came from temperance. As the movement gained steam throughout the 19th century, cider, once as common as water, became a symbol of moral decay. But the killing blow landed in 1920 with prohibition. When the Volstead Act went into effect, cider orchards didn't just lose their market, they lost their reason to exist. Federal agents reportedly took to chopping down acres of backwoods apple orchards, effectively erasing cider from American life. Now, some historians push back on the scale of that claim. Historian Dan Turdo has said he cannot find evidence that anyone actually went in and chopped down someone else's property. That would have been illegal, and there are no court cases about it. But what's beyond dispute is the cultural destruction. By the time Prohibition ended nearly 14 years later, America's cider and apple culture had been decimated. The thousands of cider-specific varieties, the ones bred not for eating, but for fermenting, had no champions left. And then came beer. Cheap, industrially produced lager flooded the market after Prohibition ended, and cider never recovered its foothold. By the 1950s, most small apple orchards had been forced out of business entirely. But Prohibition alone didn't kill the American fruit tree. The suburbs did. After World War II, America underwent perhaps the most dramatic reshaping of its landscape in history. In the 30-year period following the war, more than 40 million new housing units were built, at least 75% of them single-family homes. 85% of all new home construction in the 1950s happened in suburban areas. By the 1960s, nearly two-thirds of Americans were suburbanites, and the template for all of this was Levittown. Sales in the original Levittown began in March of 1947, and 1,400 houses were purchased in the first 3 hours. The man behind the development's aesthetic vision was Abraham Levitt, who had a very specific idea of what a neighborhood should look like. His famous quote tells you everything you need to know. No single feature of a suburban residential community contributes as much to the charm and beauty of the individual home and the locality as well-kept lawns. Lawns, not orchards, not gardens. Lawns. Levitt wrote it directly into the homeowner's covenants. Residents were required to mow their lawns once a week. And this philosophy didn't stay in Levittown. It spread across the entire country, becoming the default standard for what an American yard was supposed to be. Clean, green, empty. Fruit trees became the enemy of this vision. Urban planners adopted the concept of attractive nuisance, the legal idea that fruit-bearing trees created problems. Dropped fruit on sidewalks, insects, wasps, wildlife. City after city began privileging sterile ornamental trees, or deliberately planting only male trees that couldn't produce fruit at all. The American yard went from a productive space to a purely decorative one, and homeowners associations locked it in. To this day, HOAs routinely restrict anything in the front yard that draws insects, creates mess, or grows unpredictably. Some require all fruit trees and edible plants to be grown inside a screened-in patio. In Florida, a homeowner named Amy Becerra faced fines of $100 per day for every day she refused to tear up her fruit trees. There was one brief, shining interruption to this trajectory. During World War II, the government encouraged Americans to plant victory gardens. By 1944, an estimated 20 million victory gardens were producing roughly 8 million tons of food, the equivalent of more than 40% of all the fresh fruits and vegetables consumed in the United States. 75% of housewives were canning food, averaging 165 jars per year per household. Americans proved they could feed themselves from their own yards. But when the war ended, the bulldozers came, and Levittown replaced the Victory Garden with the lawn. So here we are, from 17,000 apple varieties to 15 that matter commercially. From an orchard at every home to HOA fines for planting a citrus tree. But this story has a third act. In 1999, a retired chemical engineer named Tom Brown from Clemens, North Carolina, started searching for heritage apples. He's now 79 years old, and he's rescued about 1,200 heritage apple varieties, finding the original trees in each case. He's driven by something simple but profound. As he puts it, these were foods that people had once cared about deeply, that had been central to their lives. It felt wrong to just let them die. Out in the Pacific Northwest, the Lost Apple Project, founded by E.J. Brandt and David Benscotter, has been combing through abandoned farms and forgotten orchards since 2014. They've rediscovered 29 apple varieties that were thought to be extinct, including the Junaluska, an apple originally cultivated by Cherokee Indians in the Smoky Mountains more than 2 centuries ago that vanished around 1900. And in cities, the tide is turning too. The Philadelphia Orchard Project, founded in 2007, has helped 67 sites grow stands of food-bearing trees in a city where 1 in 6 households are food insecure. In Baltimore, the Tree Baltimore program has given away thousands of fruit trees. As Baltimore's urban forester Ted Martello puts it, "I like to joke that people are foaming at the mouth to plant these trees." The pandemic accelerated all of this. About 55% of US households now have a garden. The surge in edible gardening that COVID sparked hasn't lost momentum. Food forests, designed ecosystems that mimic natural forests while incorporating edible plants, are gaining traction everywhere from Long Island to Los Angeles. The question now is whether this is a trend or a genuine correction. Whether we're actually willing to rethink the covenant Abraham Levitt wrote into the American Dream, the one that said your yard should be ornamental, not productive. Because for most of American history, a yard without fruit trees wasn't a yard at all. It was just grass.